Hello and welcome to the Indo Sport podcast. Will Slattery here with you, sitting in for John Mullane today. If any of you listened to the golf podcast yesterday with Joe, you probably would have heard he was sounding a fair bit huskier than usual. And when he woke up this morning, unfortunately, his voice was completely gone. So I'm stepping in to the breach this afternoon and we are talking hurling. I'm delighted to be joined on the line by John Mullane. John, how are you?
How's it going, Will? As you can see, I'm not in my van today, so I'm doing the work-life balance. I've all the calls done, and I've the rest of the day ahead of myself. So I've the pods peeled, the carrots cut, the broccoli is on, so dinner prepped, and we get the school collections out of the way now, and we'll get this podcast out of the way. So the joys of work-life balance, getting up early, getting the calls done, and having the rest of the day to yourself, particularly when you have sunshine outside, you know.
Oh, well, the sunny southeast, isn't that what they say? And yeah, hopefully we still have that van energy, though. The van is more of a state of mind, maybe, than the actual physical van. So, hopefully you can bring that today as well. Great weekend of hurling to look forward to, especially that double header in Munster on Sunday afternoon. Tip Waterford, which is kind of almost a do or die game. I know Waterford still have to go to Cork, but that looks a fairly tall order. So that game really takes on even more importance than that Limerick Cork game in the Gaelic grounds. Fascinating to look forward to that as well. And then in Leinster, the top two, Kilkenny, Dublin, not the same, scale of excitement maybe, but still an interesting game. But before we get into that, a reminder that our GA coverage on the Indo Sport podcast is with thanks to AIB. AIB is at the heart of Gaelic games across both club and county, and in 2025 they're celebrating a decade of sponsoring the All-Ireland Senior Football Championships. With this year's championship shaping up to be one of the most competitive in years, AIB is more excited than ever to bring fans closer to the action. Check out #TheToughest for more. And John, but before we look into this weekend, we were chatting a bit off air. I just want to briefly chat about Clare. Obviously, their All-Ireland title is hanging by a thread after their latest defeat to Tip last weekend. There is a set of results, not crazy results, that could see them go to Limerick in the last round with a chance to stay in the championship. But a lot of people talking, I suppose, about some of the off-field stuff as much of the on-field stuff. I know they're down some bodies and it's been a very disjointed, I suppose, championship from that regard. Some key men haven't been fully available, but kind of the absence of someone like MacCarthy all of a sudden, who played a club game just hours before their defeat to Tipperary, has a lot of people kind of scratching their heads at what's going on there. There's been talk kind of about some leaks in the camp that, Tony Kelly's injury got out and maybe John Connon's selection got out as well, whereas in previous years it might have been maybe tighter and no one would have known what was going on. People are kind of fascinated with what's going on with the All-Ireland champions.
Yeah, it's a strange one, because it's not something you kind of associate with All Ireland champions. It's more something you associate when a team that are probably trying to achieve something or trying to win something. So for me, it's very strange considering the year that they had last year, that certain things have been leaked. But in the last couple of weeks, as you just said there, the Tony Kelly, John Conlon. And look, I suppose the biggest one is the MacCarthy mystery. I mean, obviously, there's definitely has been a fall out there somewhere along the lines. Only time will tell what will come out. But it ain't good overall, because when you lose someone within a setup, or he's told to step aside for the foreseeable future, definitely has a knock-on effect. Seen that firsthand with players who've been released in the past with Waterford, and it doesn't go down well with some of those players, and particularly if he's a player that probably a big presence, big character around the setup. And look, he was a big personality for Clare last year. He was an integral part of Clare winning that All Ireland. So yeah, it's obviously it's there's signs there that from Brian Lohan's point of view, he might weigh it up, when in coming to the end of the year. Shall I stay on, or shall I stay on, or shall I go? Because what's he probably there 5 years, next year be his 6th year. So yeah, they're telling signs that they're possibly not a united group, in contrast to other counties, as we've touched on 2 weeks ago, when nobody knew anything about Nicky Quaid being a part of the match day panel, let alone starting, and all of a sudden then the team is named that week. So that tells me that the contrast of where Limerick are at and being United and where probably Clare are right now. But look, you wouldn't think that in the manner in which they finished out both games against Cork 3 weeks ago, and particularly against Tipperary last weekend. But look, they're still in with a shout. It's out of their hands now. Results have to go their way, and it's something. It's not something that you like, or you like happening to you, or the position you find yourself in. But they're still in there with a squeak. But it's going to be a big ask, and for me, I'd say they're nearly as good as gone.
Yeah, well, if Cork and Tip win this weekend, then Limerick Clare becomes kind of a shootout in the final round, and the bookies have Cork and Tip as favourites this weekend. So if it goes to that form line, Clare have at least kind of one last chance on the pitch to maybe to stake a claim. Just on the subject, I suppose, of leaking things, like you have had a long intercounty career. Did you come across that in your own dressing room where people were kind of talking out of school and kind of putting information out there, or were you yourself ever tempted to leak something out of the panel?
Possibly the worst people in regards, leaking, certain stuff within a intercounty environment are possibly the parents. So it's probably trying to keep as much as possible away from parents. And look, we've seen time and time again. I'm sure across every county, if a mother or father or an uncle or an auntie get wind of what's going on within a setup, and they're loose with the lips. 9 times out of 10, they're going to pass it on to the next person and the next person, and before you know it, the opposing county that you're coming up against, have nearly the team, or what way you're going to play, or what way you're going to set up. But generally, I think there was that kind of trust within our environment, and within everyone within our setup, whether it be the backroom staff or whether it be management, or the players, whether you are 1 to 30, no matter if you're 29 or 30 or 31 on the panel. What went in, what happened behind closed doors stayed within closed doors, and very rarely did anything break out. Now, obviously, when you're going well, as I said, and everyone is tight knit, and there's a good buzz around the environment, and everyone is singing off the one hymn sheet. Uh, Nothing gets out. But I can see, in other scenarios where there's often been times, and look, I've probably seen instances, situations where probably in other intercounty camps, and probably in our own, when things weren't going so well, that possibly things can get leaked, and that can might come from a disgruntled player who feels let down or are done by in team selection. But um, I think 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, I think if you're going down a pathway of trying to achieve success or trying to win something, I think 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, everything is kept inside the camp.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to follow the story over the next couple of weeks, as long as Clare still remain in the championship. And we might turn our attention to the weekend now. That Limerick Cork game. I know the Tip of Waterford one is similarly kind of set up nicely, but let's start with Limerick Cork, the clash of the two All Ireland favourites. And Cork's schedule was always an interesting one to me, that they started back to back matches, and then they had this little bit of break in the middle to kind of really prime themselves for this Limerick game. And there's a possibility they might meet in a Munster final as well, and potentially in the All-Ireland series, but this one still is capturing people's attention. Like, for you, what would be a bigger statement? Would it be Cork going to the Gaelic grounds, taking down Limerick for the third time in a row, or would it be Limerick showing that they're still here in this All-Ireland race and digging out a win on front of their home crowd? Like, what would be a bigger kind of, I suppose, signal in the All-Ireland race for you?
Well, look, when you lose 2 games, it's like Katie Taylor and Serrano. Katie Taylor's won the last. She have to win the last 2 fights, or is it three?
I think
Fights.
too, yeah.
Yeah. So like Serrano's on to come back back and try and get one over on her. So like when you're not defeated twice and you're not used to being beaten, and to be beaten twice within the one calendar year or the one championship, I mean, that gets your stomach turning. And I think it would be more of a statement from Limerick if they were to overturn Cork the weekend. And I think Limerick are going to bring it the weekend. I really do. And even when you hear the way John Kiley is putting out the rallying call to Limerick supporters to get behind the team, we need a big, big home support behind us Sunday. So my sense when he's asking for the supporters to come out and get behind the team, you've really got to back that up and give a performance. And I think Limerick are going to have the bit between their teeth. They're going to have hunger. They're probably going to have a lot of anger and hurt from off the back of the way they were beaten last year. At the end of the day, Cork stopped them from doing 5 in a row. They beat them down in County Queeve, and even I suppose for an awful lot of Limerick players that night down in County Queeve, the celebrations and the supporters running onto the pitch, and possibly wasn't an easy sit for some of the Limerick players. And then you throw in, I suppose, the league encounter down in County Queeve this year, which was pretty feisty affair. A lot of stuff off the ball as well, very physical. So I think it's there's probably more on the line for probably Limerick to go and win this game, and send out a statement that, hey, we're going nowhere. We are still the team to beat, and we still are the top dog. And but look, from a Cork point of view, I think this is set up perfect. I think Cork have had a 3-week break. Limerick have had a 2-week break. No excuses. I think both teams have a clean bit of health, bar one or two. And look, for me, I think probably the most interesting thing with this game is going to be, what are both Cork and Limerick going to bring to the table? When you think of how Cork went about their business last year, particularly on their own puck out, and got an enormous amount of joy off the Patrick Collins puck out. And by me saying that, where they got an enormous amount of joy, where they went right down the centre, and went ball after ball after ball with Brian Hayes coming out breaking the ball. And it'll be very, very interesting, what Limerick bring to the table. And look, it'll be very interesting what Connacht and Kiley bring to the table to counteract that if Cork are going to go down that route again. But I think there's one sure thing. I think that I can firmly predict. I'll be 95%, nearly 99% positive that will happen on Sundays, that Kyle Hayes will be centre back. And you go back to the 2 games last year where they kept a large amount of the play away from Kyle Hayes as wing. And so I think, you don't really, there's not too many management teams, get one over on the likes of Connacht, but most certainly you don't do it twice. And that's what the Cork management team and the Cork players were able to do last year. So it'll be fascinating. It'll be intriguing to see what way Kiley and Connacht are going to go about their business. And look, to counteract that, you would imagine that I don't think the Cork management are probably going to be saying to themselves, well, look, Limerick are going to be waiting for this to happen, so they might go down another avenue and they might go another channel and maybe come up with some other idea that off their own pocket that they can get an enormous amount of joy off. Because we've seen the last day between Waterford and Cork, or Waterford and Limerick. Waterford struggled for large parts of that first half on their own puck out, and so it will be fascinating. And look, with that, it'll be very interesting how the Limerick defence cope with this Cork forward line, who have massive amount of energy, a massive amount of speed. And look what they have now. They have the strength to go and back it up now, so they can go and take on Limerick, in every way,
Yeah, even the dynamic of like Cork are going into this game at the Gaelic grounds, the home of Limerick, as favourites. In the bookies. Not that that's the be all and end all, but it shows how much of a shift there's been. Like you're probably going back to the 2018 All Ireland final, maybe against Galway, the last time Limerick were underdogs in the championship game. Like I don't even remember that day, but I'm pretty sure Galway were favourites going into that one. Like so, that's 7. You're talking about 7 years since Limerick have actually been underdogs, probably in a championship match.
Yeah, but I think what is it? But I think the odds are 10 to 11
Yeah.
Cork, 11 to 10 Limerick. So look, straight away those odds tell you that there's very little to separate both sides. And I think, to be fair, I think those odds are probably, I think you can stand over those odds because there's very little to. There's very little between both these sides right now. They're probably the top two in the country right now, and it's very hard to separate them. And even when you break down this match, and even when you try and give a prediction of who's going to win this match, it's an extremely hard match to call because it could go either way. And as we've seen in the past, and particularly under Pat Ryan's watch, since he's come up against Kiley and Knock, the margin has been very, very small between either way, a point or two either way. That separated both these sides, and I think it won't be the margin will be very small either way again the weekend.
And what's your prediction for this one on Sunday?
I just think Limerick with when you hear Kiley, asking for the rally call for the supporters to come out. I think Limerick are going to bring it the weekend. I think, and I think Cork will bring it the weekend. But I just think the fact that they have home advantage, I think they're going to have the bit between their teeth. I see these teams possibly meeting two occasions. There might be a trilogy, and I see Limerick winning the weekend. But I think Cork will win the Munster Championship and the All Ireland. So that's my prediction, and my prediction is that Cork could get one over them either in the Munster final or an All Ireland final.
And do you think like the possibility of these future meetings? Do you think? I'm expecting it to be a cracker and no dilution in any way because of the potential meetings of the future. But is there any danger that like it might be a little bit of shadow boxing because they're likely to play again?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have the leeway in the Munster Championship to be able to go in shadow box. I mean, yeah, you're afforded possibly to be able to do that in the Leinster Championship, but most certainly not in the Munster Championship. It's dog eat dog, and even the loser of this game the weekend will find themselves under a bit of pressure going into the last round of games. So like, just take it. Cork would then have to possibly beat Waterford, and if they lost to Limerick and if Limerick lost to Clare, as you just touched on a few minutes ago, it will give Clare a lot of hope, and it will give Clare possibly an opportunity of qualifying if they were to overcome Limerick. But could you see Limerick losing two games at the Gaelic grounds week after week? It's a big ask.
Yeah, and to be fair, when Limerick played Clare in the round robin the last couple of years before Munster finals, they were great games. Even though there was a knowledge they might meet again, it didn't in any way take anything away from what was always a really hotly contested match. So we have Limerick Cork at 4 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock we have a fascinating game as well. Tipperary versus Waterford. It was their first Munster Championship round robin win in, I think, 10 matches or 9 matches, going back to the first game of the 2023 campaign. So that's a long time. So they had to kind of cling on with their fingernails at the end, after getting that great start with, John McGrath in form again, his second brace of the championship. They have Darren MacCarthy to come back this weekend, obviously missing against Clare following that red card before the Cork game, which was obviously a big talking point a couple of weeks back. Tip's standard seems to be up now. Like that kind of, it really felt like getting the monkey off the back, getting that win that they'd craved and kind of battled for so long. They're obviously at home as well. Waterford's last game out, against Limerick, Limerick were probably kind of comfortable towards the end, but they had that good win over Clare as well. So it seems very hotly contested as well. Like, what are your kind of thoughts going into this one?
I think it's not good. Like the first game, I think it's very hard to separate both these sides. Look, Waterford beat Clare in the first round, and Tipperary went up and beat Clare last Saturday. But you cannot underestimate the value of going up to Ennis and picking up a win. So, you could even see in the immediate aftermath of the match, the relief of some of the players that they were still in the championship. You could even see it with the embrace between Liam Cahill and Mikey Bevins. And actually, look, you be very pleased for Liam Cahill, because I think he's probably come in for a bit of unwarranted stick, even within his home county. Uh, and I think, look, I've banged the drum. Banged the drum that he's the right man for the job, and he's the right man to bring Tipperary hurling forward. And look, as I said, he put his hand up for the job, and possibly no one else wanted the job. So look, you can slowly see that they are building blocks in the right direction to getting Tipperary back to the top table. And but again, look, it's a quick turnaround. It's an 8-day turnaround, and you would be impressed by the way Tipperary went about their business last weekend, particularly in that first half. Where they really opened up Clare. And as I said, they registered four green flags, and they could have registered another couple of green flags. So they have goals on their mind. And even the character and resilience that they showed in that second half, where it was looking highly likely that Clare were going to push on. The Clare big home following were behind them. They were in the ascendancy, they had momentum behind them, and it was looking like they were going to push on and win that match. But credit these Tipperary players, they rolled up the sleeves, they dug deep, and they probably got what they deserved in the end, and they managed to see out the win, and
Yeah,
got
yeah, because
two crucial points on the board.
yeah, it's a good point you make, because say if Tip after the early goals, if Clare had just raised the white flag, and obviously we mentioned the kind of maybe some of the stuff in the background there, it probably wouldn't have felt half as well earned and satisfying for Tip than Clare actually coming back, showing their quality and their fight like they did against Cork, and Tip having then to pull away a second time to seal the win. Like, I'm sure Liam Cahill felt a lot almost better, even though they gave up that big lead. In some ways, it probably sharpens them a bit more, and you can take maybe more from that.
Yeah, and one thing that they've done in their three championship matches is that they've kept fighting to the final whistle. They got rewarded against Limerick, and one thing you look at the Cork game, albeit they were getting hammered, uh, they kept going to the end. They never gave up. They registered 24 points on the board. So when you kind of get into a habit, albeit even if you're losing, and you take it the day down in Cork, where the easiest thing for him to do that day down in Cork down a Parky Queeve was to say throw in the towel, and not continue to carry on the fight. But to be fair to him, that day they continued, they carried on the fight, um, and they had that to call upon. Then when it got the squeaky bum time in Ennis last Saturday night, that they knew that they could call upon that. They were able to go. They knew before that they were able to go roll up the sleeves, um, and get over the line, and that was evident against Limerick the first day, and that was evident down in Parky Queeve. Albeit they were getting well beaten that day, they kept going to the end, and that's one thing that he's probably instilled in this team, is that no matter what, lads, we keep fighting to the end, and that's probably one thing that we probably will see the weekend, that no matter what happens, that these Tipperary players, they have the fight in them, they have the drive, they have the desire to keep going to the end. And from a Waterford point of view, you will be hoping that they can put themselves in a position where they can bring Tipperary down the home straight and ask the questions. And the only worry you would have from a Tipperary point of view is, you know, if it does go down the home straight on Sunday, will the energy reserves be there? Because you're looking at Waterford now, they're in a nice position. They're getting a 2 week break, and you will be thinking that if Waterford can take Tipperary down the home straight, that you would be imagining that they would have better energy reserves to go and kick on and drive on to that final whistle and try and win the match.
Yeah, and like the kind of nature of Munster, like the knife edge, it's always on. Like Tip getting that draw against Limerick, which everyone thought was a good result and a good performance. The heavy defeat to Cork, but obviously the Darren MacCarthy mitigation as well, getting a man stood off before the throw, and then they get a great win in Clare. If they lose by a point this weekend, and despite playing well, they're out, and then it's another year gone, and then the pressure comes on Liam Callum. It could be his last game. It could be the launch pad for another a great championship. The margins are so fine in Munster, and that's why it's so great. Like there's so much on the line on Sunday.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I keep asking the question. The contrast between the two championships, both the Leinster and the Munster championships, and the Munster championship is that Munster, week on week, it's nearly all about survival and just trying to get into that top three. And look, there's every possibility that Tipperary could come unstuck and could lose by a point or two. And equally, Peter Queally could find himself in the same position. That's just the nature of the Munster Championship, and that's probably why we're probably asking the question why we probably need to look at the restructure of the championship going
But
forward.
why would you want to get rid of the greatest competition like in sport? It's the most cutthroat, exciting. I get the point if you're from Waterford or Tip at the moment and you're thinking, Jesus, like looking over at Leinster with envy saying they have an easier path. But for everybody else tuning in, it's the absolute apex of competitive sport. It doesn't get any better.
No, I don't, but I still think, as I touched on last week, I still think we can have a very competitive Munster Championship. But as I said, I just think something needs to give. I think there has to be, a little tweak along the lines, and maybe, as I said last week, maybe push the qualification out to both, four out of Munster and four out of Leinster, and would it take away the competitive nature of the Munster Championship? I most certainly don't think so. But look, going back to the Waterford Tipperary game, I think what will really be the focus, and I think what will both managers probably would have been focusing on the last week or 2 weeks would have been, particularly this week, when they're breaking down the analysis. And I'd say probably from Waterford, Peter Creeley's point of view, they've had 2 weeks to kind of, really have a good look at Tipperary and have a really good, breakdown of what avenue or where what points they're going to go at to try and register this win and try and beat Tipperary the weekend. And I think possibly one lad who could be key in all this the weekend could happen to be a Tipperary man, Owen Kelly. And I think they'll have to get a good look at Tipperary last weekend. And I think Liam Cattle likewise, they'll go back to that game 2 years ago where they found themselves nearly in a similar position, where they came off the back of a really good draw against Limerick. Obviously took an enormous amount out of them, and they had a big Tipperary home following behind them that day, and Waterford went up with nothing to play for up to Thurles, and they overturned them by 6 points. And I think both managers will really probably home in on that game, seeking to take anything out of it. If you're probably from Peter Queely's point of view, the one thing that he probably will go after is trying to stop this Tipperary forward division raising green flags. And I wouldn't be at all bit surprised if Waterford go with a sweeper the weekend. Just in this first half, to probably try and keep it tight early doors, and cut off the space and cut off the runners coming from out the field within this Tipperary forward division from midfield up. And I think if Waterford can stay in this match, and if they can put the tabs on one or two players, if they can tag one or two players, obviously one of those players is possibly going to have to be Noel McGrath. He's going to have to take serious watching. Likewise, Jake Morris. I think those two players are key for Tipperary, and I think a lot of the planning in how Waterford are going to win this game the weekend are probably going to be focused on both trying to curtail the influence of both those players, Noel McGrath and Jake Morris. And, we've seen firsthand as well, the informed John McGrath, he's flying it. And you just touched on it as well. Darren McCarthy will be back. And it's probably perfect for Darren McCarthy. He gets to play probably the under-20 final tonight, get the game under his belt. And that will set him up lovely for Sunday's fixture.
Yeah, fascinating to see how he responds, because like you saw the scenes of him after getting that red card, and I think Noel McGrath trying to kind of give him a bit of, I suppose, geeing up or consoling him, because he had such a good outing the opening game against Limerick and is such a promising prospect. I'll be fascinated to see how he bounces back. Like, he could have that bit between his teeth and have a point to prove, and it could kind of see him produce a great performance potentially.
Yeah, that is the fear for Waterford. Be interesting. Will Liam Cal start him? I think he starts for me. And look, it's a big plus for Tipperary either way, because if he starts, it means he's another good option to come off the bench. But look, to be fair to Darren McCarthy, I think he made a mistake. Who don't make mistakes, but there's a lot being made of it. But in one sense as well, I think it will stand to him going forward, particularly as a player in making decisions. And look, he probably sent out a message as well that he's not going to be messed around with. I think in some ways you've got to look. You don't admire what he done, but in other ways I kind of admire him that he's probably sending out a message to cornerbacks that, hey, if you want to go and mess with me, I'm not going to take any of your shit, and look, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I can only imagine the way he was in the dressing room before that match, and probably there's probably an enormous amount of people probably making noise saying, you were bullied in the league final, you got pushed around, and you want to leave that happen again. And look, we've all been there before. I've been there myself. You get worked up, and these things happen, and you pay the price for it. I paid a heavy price for it back in 04, and in fairness, Darren McCarthy, he's paid a heavy price for it, and I think he will learn from it going forward.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting subplots for this weekend for sure. So, what's your verdict then? Tip Waterford. Who's going to come out on top?
Yeah. Look, Tip have massive momentum behind them. They're going to have, obviously, they've the home advantage. They're going to have a big home following. But I think Waterford will have a big home following. It's been a while from a Waterford supporters' point of view. We love going to Thurles, where it's home from home, but it's nearly kind of a throwback to the old days, where it's nearly as good as nearly a straight knockout game. The sun is going to be shining, and they're going to be given great weather. And, it's probably advantage Tipperary that they have a home advantage, slight advantage, but a lot will depend on the recovery of a lot of these Tipperary players. An 8-day turnaround. We've seen it with Waterford against Limerick, albeit they had a 6-day turnaround. But I just think if Waterford, if they can keep it tight early doors, i.e. possibly play a sweep or go back with Tyga sweep, or if they can, if they can get tight markers on Noel McGrath and Jake Morris, and cut out the supply going inside, and if they can stay in the match, and if they can bring them down to home straight, I think they just might have more energy reserves to call upon in that last quarter. But again, it's going to be a titanic battle. I think it's going to be a point or two either way. And look, my head and my heart are thinking a 1 or 2 point win for Waterford.
Well, it's set up to be an unbelievable Sunday of Munster hurling actions. I said Tipperary versus Waterford at 2 o'clock, Limerick versus Cork at 4 o'clock. That's your Sunday afternoon viewing sorted for sure. We should touch upon Leinster before we finish up. It almost feels like an obligation that you have to get to, because it just doesn't capture the imagination in the same way. And it's almost like fitting Kilkenny play Dublin 1 versus 2 in the table. I think it throws in at 3 o'clock on Sunday on GA Plus, like slap bang in the middle of two Munster crackers. Obviously, when the fixtures were made, Kilkenny Dublin might not have been seen as the prime fixture, but still probably won't get a huge viewing number outside of Kilkenny and Dublin, considering what it's going up against.
It's on GA Plus, is it?
Yeah, I believe so.
And just on GA Plus, Will, it's fantastic. I think they've really, really, really fallen on something. I think the people presenting it, the commentators, Tommy Daymanter, Tommy, the analysis presenters, it's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. And they're probably, even thinking outside the box. I don't know if you've seen the clip going around of Richie Hogan kind of doing how to kind of set up and take a free and that, that's the stuff that we want our kids watching. And, we should, I go back to it. I just don't think we should be putting it behind the paywall. Surely we have a product now, the GA have it, and obviously the GA owned, GA Plus now, but surely, there's some avenue out there where we can get this fantastic production product onto live TV. Surely there's some channel would be willing to take it on board. And look, obviously, I do recognise and I do understand that the GA probably have to bring in, a certain amount of revenue every year. But surely there's, someone can approach the GA and say, look, this is what we're going to offer you for the year. There's only 2 or 3 months of the summer, every summer. We want to bring this onto our TV screens because, why hide? Well, you're not hiding it. There's a certain percentage of people will get to witness it, but I just think it's brilliant. I think it's fantastic, and massive kudos to the people involved. And I think it's some, as I said last year, it's something that we can grow, and it's fairly evident that this GA Plus, if you want to call it, has grown. But I would like to see it even grow even more on our TV screens because it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and it was tough last Saturday evening. I was trying to keep an eye. I was watching Donegal Armagh, but I was flicking back to GA Plus for the end of Tip Clare, and they were both unbelievable battles. But they were on at the same time, and I was flicking between TV and GA Plus on my app, and it's hard to keep track of it all. But as you say, the more people who can see it, the better. It's hard to see them going back, unfortunately, from what they've having it behind the paywall. They're probably putting more investment into it now. As you say, it's gotten even better. The coverage is top notch. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. It's just a question of how many people can watch it. So Kilkenny Dublin, as I say, on GA Plus on Sunday. TJ Reid back, 2-9 versus Offaly 2-2 from play. He gave an interview before the championship saying he thinks he can play until he's 40, and he's showing signs that might be possible.
Yeah, as I said, it's touched on it there. It's nearly kind of like Ronaldo and Messi, kind of feel it out of it with both himself and Patrick Horgan, and he's probably sending a message out to Patrick Horgan that I'm going to be here for the next 2 or 3 years, and I'm going after that scoring record. And he's similar to Ronaldo. He's probably while the legs are probably possibly not the same. He's still in incredible condition and still takes serious watching. And when you have him in around the edge of the square, I mean, he's just dynamite. He's for me, I think he's the greatest player I've ever seen playing the game. And he's still a huge weapon for Derek Ling and this Kilkenny team going forward for the rest of the summer and for the future years, please God. But Kilkenny, they're just going about their business, nice and quiet. Nobody's saying a whole lot. As one lad remarked to me during the week, he said, "Geez," he said, "I didn't even know Kilkenny and Offaly were on Saturday night." But that's not it. That's not Kilkenny's point of view problem.
Are they miles ahead of the rest of the Leinster pack?
I wouldn't say miles. I look. I'll be very interested to see how Sunday's game plays out between themselves and the Dubs. And look, it's a great test and it's a great gauge to really see where Dublin are at right now, because there's no bigger test than going to Nolan Park against the Kilkenny team, who will be mad for road, will be mad to get the win. And I think, if Kilkenny were to lose that match, they would be under pressure, because what would happen then, Dublin would be on 8 points, and just say if Galway were to overturn Dublin, Kilkenny would have to go down to Wexford and beat Wexford, and all of a sudden that becomes nearly a straight knockout game, because if Wexford were to beat Kilkenny, they'd have them on the knockout and on the head-to-head, and Derek King won't want that. He'll want to secure the win, secure another place in the Leinster final. But for me, yeah, I still think they're a team to beat, and was impressed by Galway last Saturday. They got the job done. But look, the jury's still out. For me, would they be good enough to go and take down a Kilkenny team in the Leinster final? Going off of what I seen the last day in Nolan Park, I wouldn't think so, and I don't think any of the other two teams, Dublin or Wexford, are probably at their level yet.
I think that sets the table nicely for this weekend. John, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy your work-life balance down there in Waterford, and thanks so much for joining me.